All right. First rule of this channel, we do not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So, welcome to After Waivers Week 10. What's going to go on pretty much from now on? There's a little bit more theory involved. There's a lot of discussion that I'm going to talk about regarding risk and like safety. Um, the same process that'll win you a league is the same process that'll have you come in last. That's just kind of how I see it. So some of these safer floor guys just don't do it for me because I know when I get into a money game, they're going to lose me the week. Like a 40-degree day in a semifinal game is going to lose the week against a team that's just rolling guys up there with like huge upsides, and you get caught in a week where a guy who doesn't care about floors is just rolling up all these upside players that are chasing air yards and they all hit, and you're rolling out guys that are just trying to get those like 6-point weeks. Like you're going to lose, and you're going to lose badly in a game where hopefully we're here to like win chips and not just like get participation trophies. So anyway, week 10 buys are the Chiefs, the Rams, the Dolphins, and the Eagles. That's going to be a lot of guys. And then week 11, we have the Falcons, and hopefully no one's rolling out any of those guys. The Colts, the Pats, and the Saints. So I talked about a few guys yesterday in the Chasing the Dragon video. I don't know how much I'm going to repeat myself or not. If you're more interested into the reactive side of the waivers, go check that video out. I think I talked about like the top 5 guys that I saw in my mind. Let's see. Starting out with the 49ers, they were coming off by with risk mitigation. This is how I deal with the risk of certain guys. Like, I think Brock Purdy's fine. I think you can win a league with him. I think he's got enough of a ceiling to win a league, go up against a lot of guys week to week with all the toys that they have there. But I talked about this last week. I have to be prepared for a guy like Brock Purdy getting benched more likely than like him getting injured, but injury is still a problem. And if I'm waiting around hoping that I can pick up a guy that has enough upside off of waivers, then I'm going to get hurt. So one of my leagues that I had Anthony Richardson, he went down. We scrambled. We got Kyler Murray, and then we also got CJ Stroud. So we got CJ Stroud coming off that 41 point performance. And I got a phone with my one of my co-managers tonight, and we're going to go pick up Josh Dobbs if he clears waivers. Not because we're ever probably going to roll out Josh Dobbs. He would be behind probably Kyler and CJ Stroud at this point, but we don't want him to ever face him going forward. We don't want him in the playoffs. We don't want him as a weekly streamer. We don't want to face him. It's more important that we carry 3 quarterbacks so we don't face him than it is for us to get cute or worry about safety. Like that's just how we roll. So other 49ers news, Debo practice on Monday and Tuesday, as far as I could tell. And then that's about it. If you're interested in cuffing CMC, it looks like it's Elijah Mitchell. I don't know, again, how much 60% of CMC is going to be worth compared to some of the other guys, but that would be the guy that this is the time to start cuffing your guys more each week to week to week, because eventually waivers are going to be so barren that the best play is to cuff other guys or pick up other guys' cuffs. Let's see. The defense is a weekly play. They got Jacksonville, according to my notes. And there are probably better streamers week to week at this point from what their schedule has going forward. All right, the Bears. So Justin Fields was limited Monday, and he was limited today from what I could tell based off the short week. They're playing Carolina. I don't know. Tyson Bagent, if you're going to play that game this week with Justin Fields, I think you can pick up Tyson Bagent on Thursday if you're worried. I think there's enough of a sneaky floor with him. He did 8 for 70 on the ground and got there as like the number 9 overall quarterback. So he's 18 to 30, 2 tugs, 3 picks, 1 fumble. We don't care how good he is from a fantasy perspective. We just care that he is going up against the Panthers, who just got banged up a little bit. So like on Thursday night game, it's something I would be interested going forward. Deontay Foreman this last game was at 59% snaps, 20 for 83 against the Saints. Again, if we can predict game flow, he might have more value, but it's going to be tough. Roshan was at 29% snaps, 2 for 6, and 1 for 9 in the receiving game. And then Darrington Evans was down to 9% snaps, but he was still limited on his usage, 1 for 2, and then 2 for 2 for 19 on the ground. Khalil Herbert is designated to return from the IR. It just depends on if he's going to be active on Thursday or not. And if Herbert was dropped in my league, I probably would be a little bit interested in him. But it's going to come down to if the right backs are not active. So if they activate Herbert and then Foreman is inactive, I would probably be rolling Herbert. But if they're going to roll with like all 3 or 4 of these backs at this point, I don't know if any of them are necessarily a good play outside of hoping that you get lucky with a Keaton Mitchell type of week. DJ Moore probably is going to be fine in this one. 5 for 3 for 44, lost a fumble. Maybe I would think about rolling better guys out there against Carolina. They might get after them a little bit, just like the Saints did. Cole Kmet, I was reading someplace that he's like the top 10 overall tight end touchdowns from 2022 till now. So again, chasing touchdowns when he's been this good at getting them versus the other tight ends, I probably keep rolling him out. He was at 85% snaps, 8 for 6 for 55, and those 2 touchdowns. And again, in tight end land, there's no such thing as 40-degree days. They either win you your week or it doesn't matter because the other guy's probably having the same problems that you do. And there is a little bit of a sneaky appeal for the Bears this week going up against Carolina. All right. The Bengals, Joe Burrow looks like he's healthy. He was 31 of 44, 380, 348, 2 touchdowns, and another 5 for 4 on the ground. Joe Mixon, it's kind of a sneaky buy if you can get him in your league. I don't know how many people are going to be selling any type of running backs with the situation that's going on. We'll talk a little bit more today about guys that are a little bit more valued, and if I get that video out tomorrow on the running back value. So Mixon was at 73% snaps, 14 of 37 and a tug. So he's not very efficient, but because he's attached to a good offense, he's going to have more opportunities to fall into the end zone. And then he's getting the receiving works, 6 for 5 for 31 in the air. So again, okay pieces on good offenses are better than good pieces on bad offenses. That's just the way it goes. And then if we're cuffing Travion Williams at 19%, 3 for 13. And I would imagine even though Chase Brown may eventually come off IR and eat into Travion Williams' work, if Mixon goes down, it's probably still worth at this point in the season cuffing Joe Mixon to Travion Williams because of how good the offense is. Jamar Chase is day-to-day with a back. He was 90% snaps, 8 for 4 for 41. And I've talked about this before about why I kind of just like remove guys from my draft board, because if I have to pay so much capital to get them, like a Jamar Chase, knowing that like T. Higgins is on the team and he will eat into that usage on a week-to-week basis. They're not a wide receiver 1, they're a wide receiver 2. And I have to build a roster and a lineup around that. So T. Higgins finally healthy. It looks like 83% snaps, 9 for 8 for 110. So again, Jamar Chase is probably the highest end wide receiver 2, and T. Higgins is probably in that boom bust, wide receiver 2 range, at the bottom probably of the same category, because he's going to have his weeks when Jamar Chase doesn't have his, and that's just how it goes. So if Jamar Chase is out, I probably wouldn't be chasing Tyler Boyd, 81% snaps, 5 for 3 for 56. The 2 guys that I would kind of be interested in, and again, this is something I'd have to be looking at with actives and inactives. I have it here, so hopefully I can be a little prepared. We have Trenton Irwin. He was the guy who did 76% snaps, 10 for 8 for 60 when T. Higgins was out in week 5, and so he's still hanging around. So I would be a little bit interested in them if this is all if Jamar Chase is out. And the other one is the 6th rounder. I can't even find him. Iovas. He's the other guy that I would be looking at. Looks like I have the 49ers up. Iovas, the 6th rounder from Princeton, he would be the other guy that I would probably be looking at rolling out there if Jamar Chase isn't active. And if I can guess based off of if they inactivate, or if one of the guys is inactive, if I can guess which guy is going to get more of the snap share, that might lead me to figure out which guy is going to have more of the opportunity. And there might be enough of a potential ceiling there, getting the work if the other team takes away T. Higgins to roll that guy out. If Jamar Chase misses this game. Let's see. There's a little bit of tight end news going on with the Bengals, believe it or not. So Irv Smith was at 36% snaps, 4 for 3 for 25 and a tug. And Drew Sample was at 37% snaps, 4 for 3 for 30 and a tug. And then Tanner Hansen, the other tight end, was at 5 for 4 for 45. So if we put all that together, that's 13 targets, 10 receptions, 100 yards, and 2 tugs in this game. So if we can follow these tight ends and one starts to emerge in this offense, even though we already know that it's going to be, Chase and Higgins and then probably Tyler Boyd, if there's a tight end that actually starts ticking up and can get into that range, good pieces on good offenses is always good to have. So kind of trying to track this a little bit to see where that's going might be a little bit of interest going on. And the defense actually has some appeal this week against Houston because of the situation. So to explain this when we're chasing defenses, and that would explain why as I was getting ready. So when we're chasing defenses a little bit more, we want these games where the defense has the ability to pin its ears back and really go after the other team. So even though the Texans just came off that game with C.J. Stroud where he went 470 and 5 touchdowns, it's going to be a game that projects as a shootout, and that means that there's more opportunities for a quarterback like C.J. Stroud to get sacked and to throw turnovers, and that's probably a better ceiling to chase than going, oh, this is a bad offense, and this is a bad offense that's going to play very conservative and not turn the football over and not have a lot of sacks. So in a game with the the Texans versus the Bengals, there's this possibility that it's such a shootout that even though there's going to be a lot of points and a lot of yards, there's also going to be a lot of turnovers and a lot of sacks. So that from that perspective, the Bengals would have some value against Houston, and then they would be less appealing against the Pittsburgh, even though Pittsburgh has they're not as good because they're going to be less likely to turn the ball over and have sacks because Pittsburgh can slow the game down and try and grind it behind a running game that the Houston Texans may not try and do, if that makes any sense to anybody out there. All right, you can stare at that. So let's see. The Bills. So Josh Allen is elite. If you're wondering, he's on pace for 17 picks, because he's kind of a turnover machine, but from a fantasy perspective, I don't really care about that. James Cook was at 55% snaps, 6 for 20 on the ground, another 4 for 4 for 19. And again, depending on your situation, I would be selling to someone that's really running back needy. Latavius Murray was at 45% snaps, 2 for 4, 1 for 1 for 6. And that's because I'm trying to get shares of Uncle Lenny, Leonard Fournette coming forward, because I could definitely see him being in that 60 to 70% range. And the two things that we care about from a fantasy perspective, from running back land, or red zone usage, which Leonard Fournette would tick the box on, and receiving work, which he would also tick the box on, because if we look at what James Cook is not going to do, he's not going to be a pass blocker. Leonard Fournette would do that, but that would mean Leonard Fournette is in on passing downs. And the reason why Latavius Murray is getting so much work is because he's the passing down back. So that's what Leonard Fournette could theoretically move in, take over the portion of the fantasy work on a good offense that we want. And then it doesn't matter what James Cook does. All that gravy just doesn't matter as much of if Uncle Lenny is getting a lot of red zone work because they're a good offense, and he's getting the receiving work because the Bills have one of the highest rates of passing on neutral script. Okay, so Stephon Diggs, 95% snaps, 7 for 6 for 86 in a tug. Gabe Davis, 93% snaps, only 2 targets. But again, we know what we're getting with Gabe Davis, so that's just not that interesting. If you're rolling him, or if you have him, you're just keeping him in that flex wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 slot, and you're going to have weeks where he wins you your week. You could probably build a lineup around Gabe Davis giving you this really bad week on a week-to-week basis. So Khalil Shakur was at 71% snaps. That's a season high, 4 for 4 for 57. And again, I'm not interested a lot of times in these pieces other than these wide receiver 3 type pieces, other than trying to roll them out during my bye week phase. And they're probably guys that have higher ceilings than Shakur does, even in this Bills offense. We'll talk about a few of those guys later when it comes to just as I put it to one of my co-managers, it's like a child swinging at a piñata. Sometimes the child misses, but when he hits that thing, you just can't come back from it. And I don't see a way that Khalil Shakur is going to have that week where he does 130 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. I just don't see it happening with him. That's what Gabe Davis is there to do. So moving on to Dalton Kincaid, he was at 90% snaps, 11 for 10 for 81 and a fumble loss. And I have this chart pulled up. I saw this Reddit thread.
So this last week, this is kind of what we're chasing when it comes to tight ends at certain points. This is only week 9. But you see Dalton Kincaid was at 98% route participation. And then you have Cade Otton that we're going to talk about later, TJ Hawkinson, Jake Ferguson, Mike Gesicki, believe it or not, is up there. Hunter Henry. That just shows that the receivers are so bad in New England that they're rolling out their 2 tight ends because those are the 2 better receivers they have. Then there's Dalton Schultz, there's Chig, Cole Kmet, Luke Musgrave, Logan Thomas. So these are probably the guys that are going to give us the best opportunity for that floor, and then also have the highest probability of a ceiling week to week. So that's what a guy like Dalton Kincaid, at least until Dawson Knox comes back, and even at that point, he still probably is going to have a lot of value. If they've integrated him into the offense to such an extent that they're just used to running him that way. So he may not go away even when Dawson Knox comes back. But right now, like, you can just see how he's basically the wide receiver 3 that I was thinking he was going to be at the beginning of the season. Now he's actually doing that, but he's in, being able to be slided into a tight end. And this is kind of similar to Taysom Hill when it comes to a guy that we can take advantage of the rules. Again, this is not real football. This is fantasy football. So I can take advantage of the rules with Dalton Kincaid. He's a wide receiver, but they allow me to put him in a tight end spot the same way that, like, Taysom Hill is a, not a tight end, but they're using him from a fantasy perspective for I can put him in that slot. So anyway, the defense for the Bills, this has been kind of a disappointment, and I would say get ready to be disappointed again at the or when they play the Broncos this week. It's a good matchup. I'd still be rolling them out. They have the Jets next, and then they do have the championship game against the Patriots. So roll them this week, roll them next week, and then you're gonna have to figure out what to do with them until that championship game, because that may be too good of a matchup to pass up if you can plan that far ahead to just stash a defense at the bottom of your bench. Moving on to the Broncos, again, we're talking about bad pieces or good pieces on bad offenses. Believe this or not, because they play the Bills this week, this is probably a set and forget Javonte Williams week, because the Bills have been really bad at stopping the run. And that's about all I have to say about the Broncos. I did see someplace that they were talking about Marvin Mims, but again, I'm not interested in an offense that's probably not going to be very good, and I'm not going to be able to predict ahead of time if they're going to have enough of a passing game to support any receiver, let alone what would project to be their number 3 guy. The Browns. So Deshaun Watson in this last game was at 19-30, 219, 2 touchdowns, another 3 for 22 on the ground. And again, that's like low end quarterback 1 range. They do play Baltimore, so take that with a grain of salt. Probably is going to be a streamer or a low end starter that you kind of choose those bad matchups against. Jerome Ford was at 64% snaps, 20 for 44, very inefficient on the ground. But what moves him and keeps him in that RB2 range, besides just the pure opportunity, is he was 7 for 5 for 33 through the air. And that's what has him having more value, is they use him as kind of this like hybrid wide receiver running back. So even though Kareem Hunt, who did 29% snaps, 14 for 38 and a touchdown and then 1 target, Kareem Hunt's going to get the goal line usage. That's just what they've shown that they want to do so far. So that's what limits Ford from being an RB1 to putting him in the RB2 range. But again, the overall usage and the receiving work is what's going to keep him as a solid RB2 the rest of the season. Pierre Strong in this game, as Ford works his way back from the ankle injury, it was down to 7% snaps, but he's still involved 3 for 9 and then another 1 for -7 in the passing game. So Amari Cooper was at 79% snaps. And at this point, like, he's another one of those guys that, like, I don't really need to know how the sausage was made. His touchdown came off of a deflection that bounced off a guy's helmet into the air. But again, I'm just going to roll him out every week. And I know that, he's in that wide receiver 2 range, which means he's going to have some weeks that are going to disappoint me. But if I overthink it too much, even though he's a good piece on an okay to not good offense, I'm going to get burned more often than not by trying to play that game with him. Elijah Moore, I don't care anymore. 62% snaps, 2 for 2 for 14. I just don't care. So the interesting thing that I saw, Cedric Tillman, the wide receiver, I could pull this up. He's a 3rd round pick by the Browns out of Tennessee. And this would explain why the Donovan Peoples-Jones trade happened is, so Cedric Tillman was up to 74% snaps, 1 for 3. So they must like Cedric Tillman. They put the draft capital into him, and they just wanted to give him the role that Donovan Peoples-Jones was taking up. So what I would do from this, this is good news from a dynasty perspective, from a redraft perspective. There may be some weeks that he has going forward, and it's just something that we're going to have to pay attention to when it comes to target share. That's what I would want to see ticking up. They obviously have already given him the snaps at 74%. Like, now it just has to turn into a little bit of a production, and that's what worries me a little bit more about Amari Cooper going forward, is that they're going to give more opportunity to Tillman, which means there's only going to be so much volume going around in a lower volume passing offense that's going to be like probably heavily behind Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt, and Pierre Strong, especially with a defense where they don't need to be throwing it all over the yard. So the other guy that I would have a little bit of interest in going forward is David Njoku. And that's mostly, he's more like a gadget guy, like Evan Ingram is for the Jaguars. They're not actually pushing him down the field vertically, but 77% snaps, 6 for 4, 26 yards, and then a touchdown. They're designing the opportunities for him, and there's going to be very few guys in the league that have like designed opportunities from a receiving standpoint. So as long as he's the number 2 option in this offense, he's probably going to have value on a week-to-week basis. And again, he's just another guy that if I try and get cute, he's going to burn me on my bench. And because he's a tight end, I can just, weather those not so good weeks, because I know he's going to give me other weeks against teams that just don't have a good enough tight end. And the defense, because we can talk about them right here. So I'm probably not rolling them against Baltimore, but then they have Pittsburgh, at Denver, at the Rams. We'll talk about the Rams later. Even Jacksonville, Chicago. I'm not even that worried if Justin Fields is back by then. And again, Houston, they're the defense for the Browns is good enough that they're probably matchup proof. And the biggest thing is like the Jets going forward. So they've already had their bye. I might not get cute with the Browns. I might just roll them out every week. And that would mean just realizing that it's less than ideal against the Ravens, but I'll just take it anyway. Let's see. So the Bucks, Baker May was 21 to 30, 265 and 2 touchdowns, and then another 4 for 4 on the ground. He's just one of those guys that you just plug him in and close your eyes. He's going to get there most of the time at this rate. There's nothing much to talk about. I think he's bad. I think the situation is probably not the greatest, but like from a fantasy box score perspective, it's just going to get there. So we talked about Rachaad White a little bit in the sausage video. He was at 80% snaps, 20 for 73, 2 touchdowns, 4 for 4 for 46. And again, the two things that we're looking for is that red zone usage and the receiving work. He's going to get both of those things. It's just going to be limited by the opportunity that the offense is not that good. But otherwise, like if I'm chasing certain guys and I can get a trade done for a guy like Rachaad White, especially coming off a high week where the owner might go like, I'm going to sell him high. There's only going to be so many guys that are going to have the road to be able to compete with like the cream of the crop. And believe it or not, Rachaad White probably has a better road to win a league than even like a Saquon Barkley at this point. So his competitors for backfield touches, Keyshawn Vaughn was at 8% snaps, 4 for 9, 1 for 1 for -1. So they are trying to get something done on the ground. They just don't have the talent. And hopefully the Buccaneers turn this into the same situation that the Texans do, where they're just like, screw it, we're just going to throw it all over the place because we can't run it. Chase Edmonds was at 12% snaps, 3 for -5, another 1 for 1 for -1. So even if Rachaad White is not good at running the football, he's better than his competition. So Mike Evans, 83% snaps, 5 for 4 for 87. Again, just wide receiver 2 land. Chris Godwin, 88% snaps, 6 for 2 for 16. There may be something going on with the Buccaneers when it comes to figuring out where these targets go, because Trey Palmer is up to 73% snaps, 4 for 3 for 51, fumbled but didn't lose it. And they have, to pull this up, they have a matchup coming up in 2 weeks against Tennessee. And Tennessee's got like not a good passing offense. It's this week, this week against Tennessee. So if I'm chasing the opportunity and the potential air yards this week, just from a how I would envision the defensive game plan to go for the Titans is they're probably going to be their normal. We're going to take away the run. We'll take away Mike Evans. We'll take away Chris Godwin. And then a guy like Trey Palmer, like if there's a week to be rolling Trey Palmer because of the buys and trying to get, that high upside, it would be this week against this matchup. Let's see. So Cade Otton was at 100% snaps, and I'll actually click back and we'll talk about Cade Otton. So Cade Otton was at 100% snaps, and you see the snap share because I've been talking about him all year. 97, 97, 91, 100, bye week, 96, 96, 97, 100. So a guy who's getting that much opportunity on the field, and then we can throw that together with the fact that he's doing 91% of routes. There's just going to be times where he's going to be the beneficiary of the other team taking away the targets to probably the more predictive guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So again, like this would be probably a little bit more of a priority to me. If I've been struggling with the tight ends, I'd be picking up Cade Otton on waivers. And hopefully the Buccaneers just realize they're not going to be able to throw the football. And then that would mean that they could move into that higher volume passing offense. And then again, the defense is probably a solid play this week at Tennessee with Will Levis. Will Levis does have more turnover worthy plays down the line. He will take a few sacks. So there's at least something there to be playing with when it comes to the possibility of getting something out of your defense. So the Cardinals, Kyler Murray will start week 10, and I would probably expect him to be a little rusty. So it depends on how desperate you are when he goes up against the Falcons. Clayton Tune, I don't care. I have him written down, but I don't care. Keontae Ingram was at 42% snaps, 9 for 8. And then Tony Jones off the practice squad was at 40% snaps, 3 for 2 for on the ground, and 3 for 2 for 5. Really horrible game. The bigger news to be worried about this week, James Conner is eligible to return, but I haven't heard anything about whether or not they're going to open his window or bring him off of IR. That would mean that like if they are rolling Kyler Murray out this week, I am more tracking the DeMercado news to see if he can play. If I'm in a really desperate situation, I think I dropped him in both my leagues, so I don't have him anymore, but I will be picking him up if the news is Connor is not going to come back this week. And with Kyler moving in, they're going to take the guy that's most trusted in the pass blocking role. That's been DeMercado, and the guy that is going to get 70, 80% of the snaps with Kyler back, upgrade to the offense, even if he's rusty. So most of the stuff I don't care about when it comes to their stats this week. I literally wrote down, I don't care. But I do like Hollywood Brown this week. I do like Michael Wilson if he's available and you can pick him up. Again, Trey McBride, I don't care about. He was down to 69% snaps, but again, bad week. And the defense does have some sneaky appeal against Atlanta because the offense is a mess. And with Kyler Murray returning, if the Cardinals can keep this neutral to positive, that means that there's more opportunities to take advantage of Taylor Heineke, doing Taylor Heineke things. So they're planning accordingly, depending on how deep your league is. So the Chargers played on Monday Night Football. Justin Herbert, and this is what I've talked about before when elite quarterbacks find ways to get things done, especially because they can get it done on the ground. So Justin Herbert was 16 of 30, another 3 for 17. He fumbled, but he didn't lose it. And from a fantasy perspective, Zach Wilson was a better play than Justin Herbert was this week in this matchup. And, better quarterbacks from a fantasy perspective will get it done in bad matchups. So, if you had Justin Herbert this week, the matchup would tell you sit Justin Herbert. So, the easier way to put this is Justin Herbert is a mid to low end starter from a fantasy perspective because he doesn't have the rushing floor and he is matchup dependent. So, if I had Tyson Bagent this last week, I would have rolled Tyson Bagent out over Justin Herbert because Tyson Bagent finished as a top 10 quarterback. Austin Eckler was at 67% snaps, 14 for 47, 2 touchdowns. The bigger issue that I like is 7 targets, even though he only got 2 of them for 23. The goal line work is back with those, or the goal line work with the 7 targets, even in a bad matchup, he got it done with the 20 points. And that's why the receiving work and the goal line work are so important from a fantasy perspective. So Josh Kelly was at 34% snaps, 3 for 18, 1 for 4. And again, there's some thought to cuffing your Austin Eckler shares. to Josh Kelly. The offense is going to be in that like okay-ish type land. Kelly has looked better. And I just don't know like what I would do from a roster construction standpoint to use in that slot other than to cuff Austin Eckler if I have him. Keenan Allen, 86% snaps, 9 for 8 for 77. Josh Palmer was IR this week. Quentin Johnston was at 83% snaps, 3 for 2 for 14. There's still some stash appeal to Quentin Johnston, even though it's a bad matchup. He will likely have a fantasy relevant week. And if anything, this week against the Jets probably said like this was a not predictive week or a predictive week to not roll him out, but there may be other weeks where Quentin Johnston can be slotted into like that flex wide receiver 3 range, because I know that there's enough of a ceiling in the right matchup where the game script says it's going to be a shootout. And then going back to like why neither of the Chargers tight ends have any value when they're both in the game. Gerald Everett was at 55% snaps, 2 for 2 for 18, and a fumble that he didn't lose. That's another fumble for him. Donald Parman was at 55% snaps, 2 targets. The defense is a hold and stream. The schedule is, the schedule is good for them. Again, we're trying to chase like that game script where the team can just pin their ears back and get after the other team. So the Chargers, again, because they're probably going to be like, okay, you see, like, is that right? They did 30 points. They did 30 points against the Jets this week. I didn't even see that. So even in a game against like Detroit, because both teams are going to be projected to score a lot of points, that means there's a lot more opportunity for passing and a lot more opportunity for sacks and turnovers. So they're a good role against Detroit. They're a good role against Baltimore. They're good role against all these teams that have like projections that have a lot more points being scored, and they're not as valuable going up against the teams like Green Bay or the Patriots, because they may not be a good enough defense to do what needs to be done in a game that they're not going to have to pin their ears back and put a lot of pressure on the other team, if that makes any sense. All right. So the Chiefs, again, take this with a grain of salt. This was a Frankfurt game. Patrick Mahomes was 20 of 30, 185, 2 tugs, 6 for 24, and a fumble lost. And part of the issue that I've been listening to some of the podcasts, the Chiefs may have like a really good defense, like up there with like the Ravens. And that just means the offense may be playing from a different perspective than we're used to, where they're just not trying to score points because they can put pressure on the other team to make mistakes and win games that way from a defensive perspective. So that kind of might downgrade some of the Chiefs' offensive pieces. Pacheco was at 68% snaps, which is a season high. 16 for 66. He did have 1 target, and he got the red zone carry. But like I've talked about before, Jerick McKinnon was at 25% snaps, 1 for 2, another 2 for 2 for 22, had a 17-yard touchdown in the red zone. So again, the overall ability for Pacheco to win you a league is downgraded because the opportunities are going to go someplace else. So that's that his ability to win you just the week went away because that 1 touchdown went to a different player other than him. Let's see. CEH's role went this week to LaMichael Pirine. He was at 7% snaps, 1 for 1 for carries, and then another target. And again, there was no generic Prince elevation. This is mostly from a dynasty perspective, and I'm not sure that CEH's role or CEH's true cuff to Isaiah Pacheco at this point. I think it would really devolve into a running back by committee, and then we might see generic Prince get elevated. But if you are into that type of thing, like CEH may be the guy to look at from a cuff down the line. Rashee Rice was at season high 68% snaps. He only went 2 for 2 for 17 and a touchdown. Again, this was a game that was projected to have a higher overall point total. Just didn't happen. So I have written down my notes like he is going to be a weekly start, a wide receiver 3 with some spike weeks in there. But just because of how the offense is designed, he probably will disappoint also. Let's see. Kadarius Toney was at 12% snaps, 1 for 1 for 18. Sky Moore was down at 25% snaps. So again, from a dynasty perspective, that gives you an idea where he's trending towards. MVS was at 55% snaps. Justin Watson was at 63% snaps, like 5 for 2 for 15, 70 air yards. It may be working its way out. Justin Watson may have more value going down the line if he's the air yards guy for the Chiefs going forward.
So that's something to be paying attention to. And I would be more interested in a Justin Watson attached to Patrick Mahomes than some of these other wide receiver threes that are out there. Mecole Hardman was at 22% snaps, 3 for 3 for 10, so they're not even using him vertically down the field. Travis Kelce was at 77% snaps, 4 for 3 for 14. And then again, Noah Gray, from the dynasty perspective, 52% snaps, 3 for 3 for 34. So the defense is a hold during their bye week, and they're just a weekly roll at this point. Again, they may be like, if not the best defense, they're in the consideration for being one of the best defenses that are out there this year. So the Colts, Gardner Minshew, 17 for 26, 127 and a tug, another 5 for 5 on the ground. Still going to be that like low end streamer or high end streamer, low end starter. And this is another one of those games that if we're trying to predict things where the Panthers are so bad on offense that the Colts just don't have to take chances to win the game. And that's basically what happened when Bryce Young throws 2 pick sixes, and then the Colts are just like, you can't score, so we don't have to put out a lot of effort, because otherwise we're only going to put ourselves in a position to lose the game. So because of the Colts' talent, that means how bad the defense is and how good they potentially could be on offense. It's going to be very difficult to predict when to roll out the Colts pieces, because the game script's going to be all over the place. I mean, they got into a shootout with the Browns, and then in this game against the Panthers, it was just really slow and ugly. Jonathan Taylor was at 74% snaps, 18 for 47, 5 for 5 for 22, and a touchdown through the air. Zach Moss was down to 21% snaps, 7 for 26. And, like, if I'm the Jonathan Taylor owner at this point, I'm probably going to try and buy Zach Moss, because that would probably be the better play at this point, is to cuff him. So I don't know how many Jonathan Taylor owners out there don't have Zach Moss or vice versa, but that's probably the way to go at this point. I think Zach Moss's weekly value has gotten down to the point where he's probably able to be bought. Michael Pittman was at 89% snaps, 8 for 8 for 64. Again, the inefficiency kind of bothers me, but from a week to week standpoint, like, I know that he's going to get the targets. He's the number one there, and there isn't a lot of worry behind that. Josh Downs has a knee injury. I haven't heard anything about it at this point. It's Tuesday. We're not going to know anything until tomorrow. Alec Pierce was at 100% snaps, 2 targets. And again, there are worse guys to be chasing than the guy who's going to get the air yards for this offense. It's just going to be very difficult to predict when is the week that he's going to land. Kyle Granson was back, 49% snaps, 2 targets. And then Andrew Ogletree went out with a foot, 3 for 1 for 19. And that was something I was kind of monitoring to see how the tight end situation was going to shake out there. And then Mo Alley Cox and all of this, he was the leader from a tight end perspective with 51% snaps. And then defense is a very sneaky play this week against the Patriots. Let's see. Redskins. Sam Howell, 29-45, 325, 1 tug, 1 pick, another 5 for 27 on the ground. And I just said, just deal with the fact that he's your starting quarterback at this point. I think I was reading someplace that he's quarterback 5 overall. So, like, I'm just going to be rolling him out there, and it's probably going to take like multiple weeks at this point of, him not getting me there for me to go, I need to do something about my quarterback position. If I have Sam Howell, I'm rolling him out. And again, just like with the Colts, like, some of the weeks may not be predictive because we just don't know. But at this point with Sam Howell, he's just gotten me there so many different ways. I don't care. This was a B-Rob week, 56% snaps, 18 for 63, inefficient, but he did get a touchdown, and then he fumbled and lost it, and then did another 2 for 1 for 4 through the air. I was actually thinking about this today. Like, I think with B-Rob at this point, he's just going to be in my lineup, and I'm just not going to overthink it. And I know I'm going to get burned some weeks, but it's too difficult to kind of chase when is a good week to roll him out, when is a bad week to roll him out. I was seeing that there's a lot of discussion about Antonio Gibson. He was at 44% snaps, 6 for 34, 5 for 5 for 42. He is the cuffs at this point. So if I was a B-Rob owner, I would probably be cuffing him with Antonio Gibson if I could. That may be the best outcome, is that one of the two of them go down. Unfortunately, this is what we got to think about in fantasy. And, otherwise, like, Gibson would be more of a priority cuff, because if he can get all the work together, he would jump all the way up until like high end running back 2 or, low end running back 1 land. And Chris Rodriguez, this is the reason why we're talking about Antonio Gibson and B-Rob. Chris Rodriguez, the rookie that we were watching his snaps go up, it's 0 snaps again. So yeah. Let's see. Scary Terry, 86% snaps, 7 for 5, 73. Very solid wide receiver 2. No news on Curtis Samuel's foot. Johan Dotson, 76% snaps, 8 for 4 for 46 a touch, 121 air yards. So again, there are guys to be chasing, and right now with Curtis Samuel out, Jahan Dotson is a guy to be chasing versus some of the other guys like Demario Douglas for the Patriots. I would rather have Dotson attached to Sam Howell at this rate. Jamison Crowder, 32% snaps. I think this is left over from last week, so disregard.
I think I looked him up and he just didn't
do a lot this week, so he wasn't cutting into the usage of the other guy. I just deleted that from my script. Logan Thomas, 73% snaps, 6 for 4 for 31. And a guy like Logan Thomas would be a guy that if I was running him, I would be interested in a Cade Otton. Probably a little bit more of an opportunity with Cade Otton than there is going to be Logan Thomas, but like putting the two of them together and seeing if I can guess right might be a little interesting. The defense, they have the Giants in week 11, and that's going to be a coin flip over whether or not that's a good role or not. The Redskins are bad on defense, but the Giants are really bad on offense. So hey, that would be an interesting streamer at that point. The Cowboys, Dak in this game was 29 of 44, 374, 3 tugs, and another 6 for 14 on the ground. Again, he's a middle range quarterback 1. I'm probably not overthinking it. Tony Pollard, 77% snaps, 12 for 51, another 5 for 3 for 12. And, I'm not going to get into the buy or sell discussion on Tony Pollard. There's other guys that are out there talking about him. He does have a favorable schedule going on down the line, but at this point, guessing that he will turn it around, I think is a little futile, just like, trying not to get a hold of the guy because of that schedule is probably also a good idea. I think the biggest thing, and I've been trying to get a hold of like Tony Pollard since the skid started in Dallas, because I think in one of my leagues, the owner of Tony Pollard is in last place. The amount that I would have to put forward to get him, basically the owner is leveraging him like he's still a high-end running back 1. So I don't know what you're going to be able to give to the owner of a guy who's still treating his, RB2 like he's an RB1 and think that like you're going to win that trade, even if he does turn it around the second half of the season. Rico Dowdle was at 19%, 2 for 18 and a cuff. And I was hearing about this conversation that like I could definitely see Rico Dowdle working into that Zeke role last year, which would mean that like it would allow Tony Pollard to be more efficient, and it would also mean that Rico Dowdle not only is a priority cuff, but he also would have standalone weekly appeal. So Rico Dowdle has more interest for me going forward than Keaton Mitchell does for the Ravens. CD Lamb, and I do have this. Things like this is going to be a long week, huh? This is what we want to see from a route distribution from a wide receiver. And they're moving CD Lamb around. They're taking advantage of him in the slot. They're moving around. They're using like man beaters. They're using zone beaters. They're putting him on the edge, and they're letting him go get the ball on more less efficient routes that are more productive, or low probability routes that are more productive. Like that's how they're using them. So like if I'm looking at how I am tracking, and right now CD Lamb may have more value than even Justin Jefferson. If I'm tracking what is value in fantasy football, I would want to see something like this, other than like a 5 for 6 or a 6 for 4 for like 55. That's what Demario Douglas did, and think that that's going to win me anything other than like keeping me alive in a deeper league where like there's just nothing on the wire. All right. So CD Lamb, 16 targets. I just showed them to you. Michael Gallup and Brandon Cook aren't fantasy relevant. Jalen Tolbert was at 41% stats, 5 for 3 for 49 and touchdown. I did read today that Martavius Bryant, the former Pittsburgh Steeler, was reinstated, and then he was signed by the Cowboys. So that would even make Gallup and Cooks less relevant going down the line if Bryant comes back and he can be anything what he used to be in the past. Jake Ferguson was at 89% snaps, 10 for 7 for 91 and a tug. And to bring this up again, you see that Jake Ferguson, 89% route participation. So like very valuable going on the line. any tight end that is the number 1 or number 2 in their offense is probably going to be fantasy relevant. And right now, Jake Ferguson is that attached to Dak Prescott. So I want to be buying Jake Ferguson if I can. The defense, their schedule coming forward, the Giants at Carolina and Washington, and that's all really good roles. So the Dolphins are on a bye. Again, take their stat lines with a grain of salt with that Frankfurt game. Tua 21-34, 193, a tug, and a fumble not lost. And again, I was talking about this earlier. Tua may be very matchup dependent. And again, if this is true, then anything that's a good defense, we're just not rolling Tua out. Mostert, 56% snaps, 12 for 85, a tug, 1 target, and a fumble not lost. And I would say sell right now. He's going to have limited value in a running back by committee, and he's not getting any receiving work. Devin Achane can return week 11. Jeff Wilson was at 17% snaps, 2 for 6, and another 4 for 3 for 32. And Solomon Ahmed was at 30% snaps, 3 for 4, 3 for 2 for 8. And again, that's the receiving work that I would want Mostert to be getting. And if you just take away his touchdown, and then you're hoping that he's a highly efficient 12 for 85, like you're getting closer and closer to what you think is a running back 1 being a running back 3. Let's see. Tyreek Hill, 90% snaps, 10 for 8 for 62, a fumble lost. Waddle, 54% snaps, 6 for 3 for 42. And again, I think he's banged up again.
I can actually look that up. I don't have that written down right now. Yeah, sore after the loss with a knee.
So that is something to be looking at going forward. But again, this is their bye week, so more than likely he should be healthy coming out of the bye. Chase Claypool was at 22%
snaps, and I can actually maybe pull him up if he's available.
And I don't see him in my fake league. So Chase Claypool was at 22% snaps. There's a possibility that you're going to see a usage change coming out of the bye with him. Braxton Berrios, the slot, was down to 27% snaps, but, and this is what I was looking for last week, Cedric Wilson was up to a season-high 65% snaps in this game, 5 for 1 for 31, 9 and a touchdown, 90 air yards. So that would be what I would expect Chase Claypool to move into that role of coming out of the bye. You do you, but I would be monitoring that as I hit my mic, talking with my hands. And the defense may be a hold during the bye week because of the schedule. And again, if I'm tracking that with the Dolphins, where I want these shootout games, the Raiders, if they're still good, they might be a shootout game. I'm not interested in the Jets, maybe, but that's a bad offense. The Redskins, they might be a shootout, and Sam Howell is a sack machine. So there are some games moving forward, all the way potentially even against like Dallas. That might be an interesting role in that game. Because if they are a good offense and I can roll them out there against like Dallas and Baltimore in these higher scoring games, there may be opportunity to score points. And again, risk, where there's something that we have to look at with some of these matchups when it comes to like rolling guys out there and going like, I have to be trying to win my week versus trying to have my opponent lose it for me. All right. The Eagles, they go on by. Jalen Hurts is dealing with a knee, but he did finish the second half after going down at halftime. He was 17-23, 207, 2 tugs, another 10 for 36, and a touchdown, a fumble not lost. And this is part of the reason why I advocate for carrying 2 quarterbacks as we get into the end of the season, is because like if you're riding him like I am, because he's my quarterback in my money league, if he goes down and then I'm trying to figure out how to stream going forward, I'm going to put myself in a very bad position. So picking up a Josh Dobbs now is probably a better play than waiting in to go, like this knee is going to cost him a week, which may be a week that I need for whatever reason. Like even coming in like first or second place in a lot of leagues gives you a bye week, and that bye week puts you right into a money game. And going like, well, I'll just deal with this problem when it comes out is not something that I want to do. Like I can control that part of my roster. I can't control what happens on Sundays. DeAndre Swift, 65% snaps, 18 of 43, 2 for 2 for 31. 2 fumbles, not lost. So this is one of the things, and I have was paying attention to a few people talking about DeAndre Swift. I would be selling right now on DeAndre Swift. He's been becoming more and more inefficient as the season's gone on. He hasn't had a particularly good game on the ground since Miami in week 7. He had other weeks like the Jets at 1.8 yards.
he is getting receiving work, but those fumbles are going to come up on him. And the other interesting thing I saw is Boston Scott was out. He was inactive because of personal reasons, but that just means Rashad Penny was actually active in this game. Coming out of a bye, this would be something that I would be monitoring next week or week 11 against Kansas City if Rashad Penny is active. And again, we've already seen Rashad Penny be able to be a league winner late in the season as they use his style of play to win. So that would be something that I'd be paying attention to. So if I'm a Swift owner, I would be cuffing right now before I wait for any indication of that occurring, because someone else in my league may get the smart idea about that too. Let's see. Let's see. And I had this written down, like, it's these sneaky moves that win championships, and they cost me very little to be wrong. In the case of Penny, if Penny's not active week 11, then I either don't pick him up or I drop him and I pick up somebody else. That's how easy it is, and it probably costs me nothing to find that out. So AJ Brown's elite. Devonta Smith, 94% snaps, 3 for 351 and a tug, and I'd be buying him right now because of the Dallas Goedert injury. Those targets are going to probably have to go someplace, and I'm going to guess that they're going to go to Devonta Smith over anybody else. The other interesting guy is they have Albert O, and I'm not even going to attempt to say the last name, but we just call him Albert O. That would be the guy that would most likely be moving into the Dallas Goedert role if I was going to be speculating. I don't know how valuable that's going to be. Those targets are either going to go to a running back or they're going to go to Devonta Smith. And I'm going to guess right now that if I could buy someone that has enough value, it would be Devonta Smith. Dallas Goedert, forearm fracture, surgery Monday. I haven't seen if he's been IR'd yet, but I have to imagine he's going to. And the defense, and I can bring this up again, the defense is right now, like, I don't know how I would deal with them because I'm not rolling them out again, other than if I think that they're going to get in these shootouts, and they haven't been particularly good. So maybe I'm just dropping them and they're somebody else's problem. And the only week that I would maybe be thinking about using them is in the semifinals. Otherwise, like, I don't know. I think I could drop them right now, and they will be available coming out of the bye because of the Kansas City matchup. All right, Falcons. And I just have written down, I do not trust this offense anymore and the shenanigans that are going on. Taylor Heineke, 21-38, 268, 1 tug, 1 pick, another 3 for 20 on the ground. And if he remains the starter, he's going to be in that like high-end streamer range, because again, he's going to have some nimbly bimbly, and he's going to put some balls up there that he shouldn't, and some of those are going to land, and that's going to give you like what you need to get done. Bijan was at 61% snaps, 11 for 51, another 4 for 2 for 8, and a fumble loss. Right now, his projected stat line is 194 carries, 977 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he's going to have another 77 targets, 53 receptions, 3 for 72, and 3 touchdowns. I was looking him up, and what his stat line projects from last year is Alvin Kamara's very inefficient year. So, like, you're looking at a low-end RB2 at this point with Bijan's stat line. But this year's pretty wonky, so unless some of the other running backs really start getting things done, he's going to remain in that, like, mid to upper tier RB2 range. Tyler Algier was at 35% snaps, 12 for 39, and a touchdown. He got all 4 red zone carries, another 3 for 2 for -9 in the air. Cordell Patterson was at 13% snaps, 1 carry, and then another reception, but he did have 2 other carries that were negated by penalty. And let's see, again, from a Bijan perspective, like, there's risk in fantasy football. We're talking a lot about risk today. It's a risk if I buy him and his usage doesn't change. It's also a risk if I don't sell him and his usage doesn't change. But that's how you win a chip, is by taking that chance that one of those two things would happen. I don't know. And the best thing that I think would happen at this point is the ownership steps in and fires Arthur Smith. And unless that happens, you're just playing with fire. That's just a way to put it. Drake London, per Arthur Smith, and you can believe him if you want to, he's hopeful that Drake London will play this week. And even if Drake London's active at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if he plays 2 snaps. So, like, you do you. Van Jefferson was 65% snaps, 4 for 1 for 14. Matt Collin will probably miss week 10. So there's a few other guys from an after waiver perspective that I would be interested in. If London's out and Matt Collins is out, so there's a Cordero Hodge was at 67% snaps, and I could probably just go pull him up. So he was at 67% snaps, 6 for 3 for 60. That's a little interesting if he's going to stay there. And then Scotty Miller from the Bucks, he was at 30% snaps, no targets. Kyle Pitts, 57% snaps, 5 for 4 for 56, 51 air yards. Jonnu Smith, 57% snaps, 6 for 5 for 100 yards and a tug, 12 total air yards. These were mostly screens and checkdowns, like I was talking about. So again, there are some sneaky guys for the Falcons to be rolling out there instead of knife fighting with people on waivers. If we're looking at Drake London and Matt Collins being out, that means like Van Jefferson would be an interesting 1 week rental. Cordero Hodge would be another interesting guy. Rolling out Jonnu Smith in my flex position would be another interesting thing. So even though I don't trust this offense, there may be enough predictability because there's enough guys out that I could roll out some of their pass receivers with Taylor Heineke staying in the mix. The defense, as I take this way, they're probably going to be a coin flip against Arizona this week because as I look at this, if Kyler Murray is rusty, I could definitely see this maybe a week to be rolling out the Falcons defense. Let's see. The Giants. And there's some very interesting stuff here with the Giants going forward. So first of all, Danny Dimes tore his ACL this week. Tyrod Taylor's on IR. Tommy DeVito, the quarterback, came in that game against the Raiders, was 15 of 20, 175, 1 tug, 2 picks, 4 for 17. And believe this or not, because of how bad Washington is on defense, Tommy DeVito is a streamer this week. There's maybe some chance that Matt Barkley is going to be the backup, and it wouldn't surprise me that they eventually go with Matt Barkley. But right now, Tommy DeVito is going to be the quarterback. So a guy to sell if you can. Saquon Barkley, 75% snaps, 16 of 90, 4 for 3 for 23. And again, he's just not going to smell the end zone. So you're looking at that rather consistent, mediocre running back 2 lane where you're hoping that he can figure out a way to score points and that level of production. There probably are going to be people that would be buying a Saquon at that RB2 range and going after guys that are going to be able to score more touchdowns or more predictive with their touchdowns are going to be more interesting to me going forward. Matt Breida, 29% snaps, 2 for 5, and another 2 for 1 for 6. If you're cuffing, Darius Slayton, 81% snaps, 7 for 4 for 59. But again, the reason why I bring this up with Tommy DeVito, if Tommy DeVito is actually pushing the ball down the field, I don't care if he's throwing touchdown or throwing picks. He's going to make some of these guys more relevant. And then Wan'Dale Robinson was at 54% snaps, 5 for 4 for 35 and a tuck. I don't care about that. Jalen Hyatt was at 59% snaps, 5 for 2 for 19. He fumbled. It wasn't lost, but he had 186 or 146 air yards with Tommy DeVito. And this is something that I would say to bring this up. Let me get there. With Jalen Hyatt. So after the Dallas game, if this continues against Washington, this would be a week that I would be interested in rolling Jalen Hyatt out with a Tommy DeVito just throwing balls up into the air. And if Jalen Hyatt can get a hold of these yards, like that would win me a week. So that's the difference between a Wan'Dale Robinson doing 5 for 4 and 35 that gets me 12 points, and the ability for Jalen Hyatt to give me like a 24-point week because he gets these air yards done. In 2 weeks with him working with Tommy DeVito, that's something that I would be looking at. Let's see. I don't have any Darren Waller news. I got to delete that. I left that in. IR'd. Daniel Bellinger was at 86% snap, 3 for 3 for 43, and he's going to be a high-end streamer, especially this week against Dallas. I could see him being the number 1 guy this week, and again, he's going to have more value next week against the Redskins. And the defense, I just have no. They're bad. All right, the Jaguars. Not a lot of news for the Jaguars coming out. Zay Jones, I did read, is a candidate to go on IR. Haven't heard if that happens yet. I don't know if that necessarily helps Ridley and Kirk at all, or it hurts them. It just kind of depends going forward. But at least if you have Zay Jones shares, you'll know one way or another once he goes on IR.
The Jets Monday Night Football. I watched some of this game. It was a sight to behold. So Zach Wilson is not actually the reason why the Jets are bad. He is part of the reason, but he is not the reason. He had 3 fumbles, 2 lost, 3 for 49, 263. There were drops and penalties. And again, he outdueled Justin Herbert from a fantasy perspective. Breece Hall, 60% snaps, 16 of 50, 4 for 10. And again, it's just like a big red arrow telling the defense that like this is guys going to get the football in the least creative ways possible. Dalvin Cook, 9% snaps, 2 for 7, and another 2 for 1. Michael Carter, 31% snaps, 6 for 24. So if you're cuffing your Breece Hall shares, probably going to go with Michael Carter. Garrett Wilson, 98% snaps, 13 of 7, 80 yards and a fumble. Again, had some drops. But I'm still chasing the usage in that game. I don't care how bad it is. I'm not going to be watching a lot of these games. I just care about the stat line from a fantasy perspective. Tyler Conklin got there, 62% snaps, 6 for 66. So again, depending on how deep your league is, he's back on the menu when it comes to possibility of streaming. And then I have this written down. I'm not sure if I would be rolling them out against Las Vegas. And they have a tough schedule with a bad offense. So there are some possibilities like week 13 against Atlanta, week 16 against Washington, and then at Cleveland week 17. But again, I probably would want them to be someone else's problem from a fantasy perspective. There might be defenses that I want to be rolling out there that can get me more points than hoping that like the Jets can give me like a 40-degree day. And I will bring this up so we can talk about it. So you see that like even in the script against the Chargers, because their offense is so bad, it's actually affecting them from a defensive perspective. So they're only able to get 7 points off of 2 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. So again, like there are other teams that are going to be able to generate more pressure and more turnovers than the Jets are, because what the Chargers could do is just sit back with Justin Herbert and say, we're not going to make mistakes because the Jets will, and that's how we'll beat the Jets. So that's something I would look at going forward, is saying like maybe from a theory standpoint, better defenses are not the way to go. I want teams attached to good offenses that are going to put pressure onto the other team's offense. If that makes any sense. All right, the Lions. David Montgomery is trending towards playing this week. He did practice on Tuesday. And then the other thing that I have news and notes is Jamison Williams with the Donovan Peoples-Jones trade. His stock is just going down, and it's something to be paying attention to, especially in redraft. If Donovan Peoples-Jones outsnaps him this week, then it's like just if you're holding on to the possibility of Jamison Williams, like that's going to be a pretty good indicator that they're done. And I have for their defense maybe a pickup and a stash for week 11, depending on whether or not Justin Fields is going to be starting. Let's see. The Packers, Jordan Love, 20 of 26, 228, a touchdown, 4 for 7, and a fumble not lost. And again, like as long as he's able to do that, it doesn't matter how bad he is in real life. He's going to be, give me a high-end streamer, low-end quarterback 1 weeks every week. Aaron Jones back on the table, 57% snaps, inefficient 20 for 73 and a touchdown, another 6 for 4 for 26 and a fumble lost. So if that's going up there, like I don't know how much at this point the Packer or the Aaron Jones owner is going to be selling or not, but it would be something to look at, especially as bad as he's been all year. If I'm a Aaron Jones owner, it's probably a good indication that like maybe I can salvage the second half. AJ Dillon, 40% snaps, 9 for 40, and then another 1 for 3. So I guess AJ Dillon has turned it around also. Christian Watson, no concussion, but he did leave the game with a back and a chest. I haven't heard anything yet on him. 78% snaps, 2 for 1 for 37. And I imagine he's going to be inefficient and non-predictive going forward. I probably don't want any pieces of this offense. Romeo Doubs, 86% snaps, 3 for 36. Jaden Reed, 39% snaps, 3 for 19. Dontavian Wicks, 4 for 49 and a fumble lost. So now they have another guy even taking away opportunities from the weapons that we thought were going to be better. Luke Musgrave, 83% snaps, 4 for 3 for 51, and finally got there with a touchdown. And I will bring this up again, like why we're chasing this with Luke Musgrave from a usage standpoint, just from last week. He's a top 10 tight end.
So if there would be one receiver out of this whole bunch that I maybe would be holding on to, it would be Musgrave because of the fact that he's a tight end. And then there's some appeal for the Packers. Just want to double check this. I think I have, yeah, they have at Pittsburgh this week, so there is some appeal for them this week. Pittsburgh is going to be, lower. They're not a good offense, and if you're chasing that type of theory when it comes to usage, Green Bay, they're not going to get a lot of points hung on them. Kenny Pickett has been, the offensive line hasn't been good. They don't have a good running game. This would be a good week to maybe try and play it safe with the Packers defense if you're into that thing. So Panthers, Bryce Young, 24-39, 173, a touchdown, 3 picks, another 5 for 41, some nimbly bimbly on the ground. And I have this written down from a redraft perspective. The Panthers are not going to help anybody this year. From a dynasty perspective, it's getting really hard to even evaluate Bryce Young going forward. So that's something to be paying attention to if you're holding on to your Bryce Young shares. Again, this may be something that needs to be fixed with a change in coaching. Chuba Hubbard, 63% snaps, 16 for 58, 6 for 4 for 9, a fumble not lost. Again, I'm going to be paying attention to this going forward, Chuba Hubbard, because Miles Sanders was 25% snaps, but he was efficient with what he got. 6 for 39, 5 for 3 for 22. If someone dropped Miles Sanders, or you can buy him on the cheap, maybe, because the efficiency was higher in this timeshare this week. Raheem Blackshear, 10% snaps, 1 carry, 1 for 5, 1 for 1 for 5. And again, like the third back hanging around there does not make me like the offense. But again, what can I buy on the cheap that hurts me very little to find out that I was wrong? Miles Sanders right now. The ghost of Adam Thielen was at 97% snaps, 6 for 5 for 29. And again, I talked about this last week with the change in play calling and the change in coaching. I would imagine that his efficiency is going to go down because they're going to try and get the football to other places. Let's see. Jonathan Mingo is at 96% snaps, 4 for 1 for 5 this week. And if you're chasing anybody, it would still be him. The tight ends, Tommy Tremble isn't a thing if you don't care. He was down to 44% snaps, and Hayden Hurst jumped back in with 58% snaps. And again, probably want nothing to do with this. Maybe there's a possibility that like I'm chasing one of these running backs because of how bad the running back situation's been all year. And even though never trust Thursday Night Football, the Panthers do play at Chicago this week with Tyson Bagent, who had those 4 turnovers. Something to be aware of. If I really want to be risking it, this would be the risk of all risks this week. Patriots, Mac Jones, 24-44, 220, 1 tug, 1 pick. Some appeal going up against the Colts. Colts are actually worse than the Redskins are. Ramondre, 63% snaps, 9 for 87, a touchdown on a 64-yarder, 6 for 4 for 42. I'm not too overly bullish on Ramondre because I don't know how often a 230-pound back that runs a 4.6 is going to get a 64-yarder. Again, if we take that out of the stat line, care about how the sausage is made, that's going to be like 8 for 23. So that's not good. So if I can sell my Ramondre shares, and I was reading about this today that the Patriots schedule does open up a little bit. If I can sell my Ramondre shares, maybe I will sell high. If I can't sell my Ramondre shares, there's enough there that at least makes me think that I could salvage the rest of my back end of my season at him being a low end RB2. Zeke, 39% snaps, 6 for 17. Another 5 for 3 for 15, and that's going to really cut into Ramondre being anything more than probably that low-end RB2 at this point. Demario Douglas, talked a lot about him, 83% snaps, 7 for 5 for 55, 47 air yards. And I talked about this in the sausage video. So Hunter Henry was at 88% snaps, 7 for 4 for 39, and a tug. He had 54 air yards. So to repeat myself, Demario Douglas had 7 targets, the same as Hunter Henry, and the wide receiver who runs like a 4.3 had 47 air yards compared to Hunter Henry, the like 4.8 tight end who had 54 air yards in the same amount of targets. So, you decide what's valuable to you. Jalen Reagor, 77% snaps, 6 for 1 for 11, and he had 41% air yards. So part of that is just going to be the design of the offense, it looks like. The defense does have some appeal going against the Saints this week. Again, I don't know how predictive the Saints are not the Saints, the Colts. I don't know how predictive the Colts are going to be all year. So like the Patriots against Gardner Minshew, who can be a turnover machine, that's kind of interesting to me. Again, the Raiders this week, take this all with a grain of salt because of the game against the Giants. AOC, and I hate calling him that, but that's what everybody seems to be calling Aiden O'Connell. 16 to 25, 209. I watched some of the tape. He looked serviceable. Josh Jacobs, 78% of snaps, 26 and 98, 2 tugs, no targets. All I care about from O'Connell is, can he make the toys viable? He's going to make Josh Jacobs viable. Zamir White, only 8% snaps, 2 for -2. I'm a little downgrade on the cuff of Jacobs at this point because of this usage in the blowout. Amir Abdullah, 13% snaps, 2 for 8, another 2 for 2 for 17. I'm starting to think that like if Jacobs goes down, then like Zamir White might be like the 2 down banger, and then Amir Abdullah is going to get a lot of the more valuable usage. So if you're cuffing, I'm less enthusiastic against with Zamir White. Devontae Adams, 88% snaps, 7 for 4 for 34. Jacoby Myers, 82% snaps, 2 for 5 for 38. Hunter Renfrow was down from a season high last week to 22% snaps, 3 for 2 for 32. Trey Tucker, 47% snaps, 3 for 2 for 52. That's a little bit more interesting for me. I don't know how much any value he's going to have in a redraft this year, but a dynasty perspective, that's something to be paying attention to. Michael Mayer, 88% snaps, 2 for 2 for 11. Austin Hooper, 48% snaps, 1 for 1 for 10. So the passing game for the Raiders, this is probably not a good week to really try to take anything away other than Aiden O'Connell's probably going to be like serviceable. And that means that there are going to be negative game scripts that the Raiders get into where they just let him throw it. He's going to have some turnovers, but it's probably going to allow Devontae Adams to be usable, and that Michael Mayer is going to be usable going forward. This was just a really bad week where they were able to just really get after the Giants and take advantage of Daniel Jones going out and Tommy DeVito just not being a good NFL quarterback, and that's going to mess with the offense overall. So to be able to really tell what direction they're trending in, I would say up. So if I can buy a Devontae Adams, because he's going down, even though the offense looks like it's better, I would be. And Michael Mayer, another one is. I think they're going to try and get him more involved with the offense going forward. So there's still a possibility that he could be the number 2 in this offense. So I would be picking him up on the cheap also. And the defense does have a little bit more value after what they did to the Giants. They played the Jets this week. And again, the Jets just got bullied by the Chargers pass rush. Max Crosby in the discussion for Defensive Player of the Year. I could see him doing the same thing against the Jets. So like, if I had the Raiders last week, and I do, I'm probably going to be rolling them out. The Rams, I just have, thank God for the bye week. So Matt Stafford's sprained UCL on his thumb. They signed Carson Wentz today. I have Brett Rippon's stat line. None of us care about that. They waived him after they signed Wentz. Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman, I would still be holding on to them over the bye week. Kieran Williams is not eligible to return until week 12. So the offense is going to be viable week 11. And depending on what my running back situation is, if I've already picked up one of them, I'll probably just be rolling them out if I need to in week 11. So Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, don't care. They both have 7 targets. I imagine Carson Wentz is going to be a substantial upgrade to Brett Rippon. And I wouldn't be surprised if he operates in the same category as Matt Stafford when it comes to overall fantasy-ness. And the good news is if he gets a bye week to integrate himself into the offense, and then this pushes Puka and Kupp back into high-end wide receiver 2 territory. More importantly, Carson Wentz locks on and plays hero ball more than Matt Stafford does. Why does that matter from a fantasy perspective? Because I don't care if they're necessarily good targets. I just care that my guys get targets. Carson Wentz does that. The Ravens, and I've talked about this before, the Ravens may just be really good at football. They may be the best team in all of real football. From a fantasy perspective, they may be the worst team because they just don't need to. So Lamar Jackson, 21, 26, 187, another 10 for 60, 2 fumbles, 1 lost. They just don't need him. Gus Bus did his damage on 18% snaps, 2 touchdowns, 3-yarder, 4-yarder, 5 for 52. And again, I don't know how much Keaton Mitchell is going to eat into all these guys' roles. They all seem to have their specific role within the offense. Justice Hill, 63% snaps, 13 for 40, and one target. Keaton Mitchell, 18% snaps, 9 for 138, a tug, and another 1 for -40. So if I had to guess, I would imagine that Keaton Mitchell is going to eat into the Justice Hill role a little bit. They probably trust Justice Hill to be a better pass blocker at this point, and I could definitely see this turning into some type of like try to guess the game flow of the Ravens and a 30-30-30 split between the three of those guys. But again, with Lamar Jackson potentially getting some of the red zone carries that are going to turn into touchdowns, I don't know how valuable Keaton Mitchell is going to be going forward. He would have to get those two things that I just don't think that are going to happen. I don't think the Ravens running backs are really going to be involved in the passing game, and I don't think any of them are going to be consistent enough from a red zone usage standpoint to matter. What would I be putting in on a Keaton Mitchell if I was really hurting? I don't know. It depends on how much I'm really hurting and how my league rolls, but I'm not expecting him to win a league. Zay Flowers, 68% snaps, 1 for 11. And again, I think this is just an issue that they don't need any of these guys. OBJ, 46% snaps, 7 for 5 for 56, a touchdown. Again, this was to Huntley, the backup, and he lost a fumble. So I wouldn't be holding my breath if you're a OBJ truther. Rashad Bateman, 57% snaps, 5 for 3 for 28. Nelson Aguilar was at 55% snaps, 1 for 2. And again, I don't think any of these guys are going to be predictive, especially if they have a good defense and they can just lean on other teams to make mistakes, and they just don't have to really put a lot of pressure on themselves to win games unless we can kind of guess what that script would be like. And their defense at this point are a weekly play period, and they have the bye weeks 13, so you can plan accordingly. All right, the Saints. Derek Carr, 25 of 34, 211, 2 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara was down to 49% snaps, 9 for 26, another 5 for 4 for 44. And this is kind of turning into a timeshare, not with Jamal Williams, who was at 43% snaps, 3 for 6, and another 3 for 6. It's turning into a timeshare with Taysom Hill. And Taysom Hill, I actually have written down, Taysom Hill may turn into the fantasy MVP this year based off his usage. So I'm going to jump all the way to tight ends, talk about Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill was in at 46% of snaps. He had 1 for 3 passing and a touchdown. He had another 11 for 52 rushing, and then another 4 for 13 and a touchdown receiving. This is going to turn into the most valuable guy because he can score touchdowns in 3 different ways. And more importantly, if he's just a running back and not a tight end, he's getting the red zone carries or the red zone opportunities, and he's getting receiving work, which if he was just a running back would put him in the discussion as an RB1, but he's a tight end. So again, this is probably the most valuable piece in all of fantasy right now. Kendre Miller was an ankle. From a dynasty perspective, he does have some interest. He was at 31%, or he had a 31-yard catch before he went out. Chris Olave, 8 for 6 for 46 and a tug. Michael Thomas, 63% snaps, 1 target. Rashid Shaheed, 51% snaps, 3 for 3 for 22. And Jawan Johnson, 75% snaps, 5 for 5 for 29 and a tug. But again, the biggest news to take out of the Saints is Taysom Hill is cannibalizing everybody else's opportunity, including Kamara at this point. And I think that's what's going to take away from your Olaves and your Shaheeds and everybody else is the most valuable thing in fantasy is those touchdowns. And if this is the guy that's getting all the opportunity to score touchdowns, that's the most valuable guy in fantasy, and it's going to downgrade everybody else on the Saints. The Seahawks. Geno Smith, again, take this with a grain of salt. They got smashed by the Ravens, 13 of 28, 157, a pick and a fumble lost. Does have a very favorable matchup this week with the Redskins. Kenneth Walker down to 49% snaps, 9 for 16, 2 for 1. Zach Charbonnet, 55% snaps, 4 for 8, 1 for 5. So I saw Zach Charbonnet popped up on a lot of things. He should have already been cuffed to Kenneth Walker going forward. I don't know what the backfield is going to look like. I can definitely see Kenneth Walker getting some of the less valuable carries and being the home run hitter, and Zach Charbonnet being the dirty work back, but being the back that gets the valuable touches, receiving and red zone work. So if you're worried and you're a Kenneth Walker owner, I think you should be from a fantasy perspective. From a real life perspective, I think it's great, and I don't think you should be worried about Kenneth Walker. From a fantasy perspective, I do think that you should be worried about your Charbonnet shares. Again, I'm not too concerned with the receivers for the Seahawks. Metcalf, 86% snaps. Lockett, 90. JSN, 82% snaps. That's a high, but again, I imagine that's a game script issue. They were behind most of the game for the Ravens, so I could definitely see they were in 3 wide receiver sets. Jake Bobo was at 18% snaps, which was a season low, and then that's a game script issue. And again, if we're trying to get into a situation with the Seahawks where we have to guess game script, that's going to be tougher to do because we can see how non-predictive guessing some of these game scripts are. So that's going to downgrade all the receivers for the Seahawks unless we can guarantee they're going to be passing a lot in 11 personnel, and then that's going to upgrade JSN over some of the other guys. I guess at this point, that's kind of what I'm getting, taking away, that JSN's value is going to increase over the course of the season, if we can guess that. But again, I think that the Seahawks want to beat teams with defense and run the football, which would upgrade Zach Charbonnet. The defense this week is Washington, so yeah, that's a roll. I like that matchup, and the Seahawks do have kind of a sneaky good defense. The Steelers, Kenny Pickett, 1930, 160 and a tug. Najee, 58% snaps, 16 and 69 tug, 2 for 4 for 7. And this is against the Titans' good run defense. Jalen Warren, 40% snaps, 11 for 88, 3 for 3 for 25. Because of the running back landscape, I'm just rolling them out every week. I think that's what the Steelers want to do. I don't think they want to throw too much. They want to keep these uglier scripts. That's going to keep Najee and Warren in the picture somehow. And then you're just kind of hoping one of them falls in the end zone or gets the efficiency. Najee is not going to be efficient. Warren is going to be more efficient, but Najee is probably going to be the red zone guy. So yeah, and George Pickens, I'm not going to talk too much about George Pickens this week. May be hurt by Deontay Johnson. So it may push George Pickens from that wide receiver 2 range back to that wide receiver 3 range. Push Deontay Johnson in that low end wide receiver 2 range. He was 88% snaps, 9 for 7, 90 and a tug. And then Muth, he's still IR'd. Again, we talked about maybe the Steelers are a good roll this week against the Packers. The Texans, CJ Stroud, wow, 30-42, 475 tugs, and then a fumble not lost. No news on Dameon Pierce. Singletary, 75% snaps, 13 and 26, 2 for 2 for 0. Mike Boone, 26% snaps, 1 for 3. He's the passing down guy. I'm kind of hoping that they just don't care about the running game going forward and they just go all pass, like 60-70% snaps would probably be what I would be hoping for. So Singletary is never going to be very fantasy relevant because he's just not a good enough athlete to get it done outside of if he is leaned on as a receiving back and gets the red zone work. And that's just kind of not what his thing is. I could see Pierce being the red zone guy, Singletary being the 20-20s guy, and then Mike Boone being the receiving work guy. And if that turns into that going forward, none of them are usable from a fantasy perspective. Nico Collins, 79% snaps, 5 for 3 for 54 and a tug. We'll talk about the receivers here in a second. Tank Dell, 85% snaps, 11 for 6, 114, 2 tugs. Noah Brown, 72% snaps, 6 for 6, 153 and a tug. And I'm going to talk about predictability and opportunity here in a second. Dalton Schultz, 79% snaps, 11 for 10, 130, a tug, and a fumble lost. So let me go pull up the Texans. And I think Robert Woods is still out. I was reading someplace that he hasn't even practiced since week 6. So I'm not expecting him back when I have this conversation. So when we look at a guy like Noah Brown, and I looked him up, he was a 6th-round pick for the Cowboys, and then he signed a $1.5 million one-year deal with the Texans. So why I bring this up with his 72% snaps, 6 for 6 for 153 and a touchdown, and that's coming off 72% snaps, 5 for 3 for 57. So when you're very efficient at the 6 for 6, like when we look at like a guy like Brandon Ayuk, if he misses on the week and he doesn't get his catches, he's automatically going to fall into that 5 for 357. So he's not really fantasy usable at that range. There's a whole bunch of wide receiver threes that we can just put into that group. Now, where he's going to get his hay is when he can get these huge, or this week of 6 for 6 for 153 and a touchdown. That's not going to be very predictive, and that's high efficiency. He is getting the opportunity, but this was in a game where there was 470 yards to go around and 5 touchdowns. So how often do I think that the Texans are going to be in that ridiculous of a shootout type of game? I don't think it's going to happen very often. And then we're looking at Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz. So are there worse guys to go chasing pieces of this offense? No, there are not worse guys. This is a good play if I want to be rolling out what is essentially the fourth option in this Texans offense in a week where Nico Collins did not get home from a fantasy perspective with that 5 targets for 54 yards. Tank Dell got the 11 targets for 6 receptions, 114 and 2 tugs. So again, Tank Dell doesn't have to be as efficient as I smack my mic. Tank Dell doesn't have to be as efficient to get the same essential stat line from a fantasy perspective as Noah Brown does. So if I'm picking up Noah Brown, it doesn't matter if he's good or bad or anything. I don't know anything about the guy other than, what his contract situation is and what his pedigree is. I realize that there are going to be weeks where Noah Brown goes 3 for 1 for 12. And there's probably also going to be weeks where he's capable of 6 for 6 for 153 and a touchdown. It depends on if the Texans stay a 60 to 70% pass team. I'm hoping that's what occurs, but again, hope is not a strategy. So in this case, do I want the number 5 option or number 4 option for the Texans, or do I want to go chase a number 2 option in a lower volume passing offense? And that's a good question. Probably, unless I'm really wide receiver needy, I'm not going to be chasing Chase Brown doing this again. But there are worse guys to go get, and I think that most waiver wires he's going to fall through entirely. So Tank Dell should already be rostered. So should Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz. So yeah, taking a swing at Noah Brown is not a bad idea, especially in that wide receiver 3/flex role. I just think that it's going to be very difficult for him to do this again on the season. And I do have written down with my notes with the Texans, especially if they stay in this higher volume type passing offense, good offense, that some of the stuff that I talked about earlier when it comes to the Texans defense, the Bengals, the Cardinals, Jacksonville, I'm not interested in. Maybe Denver, maybe the Jets, maybe Tennessee, the Browns and Tennessee again. So they still have an upcoming schedule that is going to be very good heading into the playoffs and the playoff push. All right, the Texans, Will Levis was named the starter today. Let me pull this up. Will Levis was named the starter today. Derrick Henry's at 49% snaps, 17 for 75, a touchdown, 4 for 3 for 27. Going to be that volume-based RB2 going forward. Tajay Spears, 59% snaps, 5 for 18, 6 for 4 for 4. And again, he's on the fringe of having standalone value. So there, again, when I'm trying to track the value of certain players, I know that Spears is probably going to get very close to 10 opportunities a game. Keaton Mitchell, I don't know what he's going to get next week, and I doubt he's going to get 10 opportunities a game. So if I'm throwing a guy out there and I'm expecting a ceiling, maybe I'm going to chase Keaton Mitchell. If I'm throwing a guy out there and I'm expecting a floor with the possibility that he gets lucky with a touchdown, it would be Tajay Spears. And Tajay Spears has the ability to win me a league if Derrick Henry goes down in a way that Keaton Mitchell, even if Justice Hill or Gus Bus goes down, he still can't win me a league, especially because Lamar Jackson is their de facto goal line running back. All right. So DeAndre Hopkins is still a buy. He was 11 for 4 for 60 and 153 air yards. So yeah, as long as Will Levis is there and he's attached to Derrick Henry, I want my DeAndre Hopkins shares because he's going to have a lot more spike weeks going forward if he's being used in this capacity. I did see Kyle Phillips talked about in a few waiver wire pickups. Again, low volume passing offense. He was only at 30% snaps, 5 for 4 for 68. So when we talk about Noah Brown and Kyle Phillips, I just don't see how predictive that these guys are going to be on a week-to-week standpoint. And I could probably go into a lot of leagues and pick up wide receiver threes and roll them out there and have the same outcome, if not better, than a Kyle Phillips. Treylon Burks is in concussion protocol. I did see that he showed up to the facility on Friday, if you're worried about that. Chig is back in the discussion. 73% snaps, 4 for 3 for 28. He's going to have his weeks. I just don't know how predictive they are. So if you're chasing the tight end position ceiling, he's going to have one of the better ceilings out there. The defense does go at Tampa Bay and Baker May. And then finally with the Vikings, Jaron Hall, concussion, will not be starting this week. Josh Dobbs, I already talked about Josh Dobbs. He's going to be a low-end to mid-range starter for the rest of the season. So, a high-end streamer, if you're in 2 quarterback leagues, something like that. He did 20 of 30, 158, 2 tugs, another 7 for 66, a tug, 3 fumbles, 2 lost. Don't care about that from a fantasy perspective. The interesting thing about Josh Dobbs, and I don't know if I have this written down. So I was seeing that the play was coming into the huddle. He doesn't know the playbook. So they were having to explain to him the concept as he was coming in the line, and then he was still able to do this. So I would imagine going forward that Josh Dobbs is going to get better in this offense with the toys. Probably still going to have that rushing floor. So yeah, I'm really excited to be picking up Josh Dobbs, at least to keep him away from my opponents with Justin Jefferson coming back. Alexander Madison, 56% snaps, 16 for 44, 2 for 2 for 49, a tug. With the Cam Akers Achilles tear, this moves Ty Chandler back into the discussion. Alexander Madison has not been particularly efficient. So stashing a Ty Chandler and expecting that maybe this offense moves forward and they give more run to Ty Chandler and he can eat into Alexander Madison. That's something that I was talking about at the beginning of the season. I can see it happening again. Justin Jefferson is eligible to have his window open, but I haven't heard anything about that happening yet. Jordan Addison, 97% snaps, 7 for 5 for 52. KJ Osborne is in the concussion protocol. I don't know who of the other wide receivers is really going to benefit from that at this point, other than TJ Hawkinson, 84% snaps, 12 for 7 for 69. He's dealing with a rib problem, but expected to play this week. And finally, their defense goes up against New Orleans, and their defense for the Vikings has been sneaky good this year. I guess no one is trying to run on them, and they are blitzing at like the highest rate of anybody in the league. So with what the Saints have been doing this year, it would not be too bad of a role to have the Vikings defense go up against the Saints. So anyway, from a kicker standpoint, Young Ho was number 1. McLaughlin, I think, was the Tampa Bay kicker, was 2. We have Tucker, Carlson, Folk, and Joseph. I could probably pull that up so I can talk about this kicker week 9. So again, we're trying to look at least okay offenses, probably that are going to stall out. So like a Nick Folk, Joseph for Minnesota, Gay for Matt Gay for Indianapolis, like even Cameron Dicker for the Chargers, going a better offense going up against a good defense. Like we're kind of looking at these middle of the road guys that just have the opportunity to kick like 2 or 3 field goals in a week, and that's going to be more valuable than going up against a kicker attached to a good offense going forward. So maybe there's a little predictability in that. I'll look at that maybe during the sit start show. And I don't really have a lot to recap this week because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. But again, I'm looking to control my risk appropriately. I want to be taking risks because that's how I'm going to win. But I want to make sure I do it accordingly to how my lineup is set up. And again, some of these guys that I'm trying to chase a 40-degree day have less ability to win me a league than a guy that is going to have the same possibility of me striking out as me hitting a home run. So anyway, that's about all I got this week. Hopefully this goes well. And yeah.